The sermon I'm going to preach this morning, I preached it at midweek communion a few weeks ago, and most of them stayed awake through it. So I really enjoyed preparing it. I was inspired in this sermon by a chapter I read in a book, so I don't want you to think I'm more intelligent or eloquent than I really am. And I want to share this with you now. I remember being a lad in this church, and at the age of 16, I went and preached my first sermon. I went to Rust Hall. You see a picture of it here. That's actually where my mum left me in my pram for 15 minutes when she went home, when we lived in Rust Hall, and got home and realised she'd left me at the shops and went back and found me on the high street. It's why I struggle with my mother. And I went there as a 16-year-old to preach with Stan James, who was the church secretary. Anyone remember Stan James? Yeah, he'd be about 130 now, wouldn't he, if he was still alive, I think. And it was a genius by Derek Hills to send me with Stan James, because we went to this little tin hut opposite where my auntie and uncle lived. They couldn't be bothered to walk across the road to come to the service, which was very hurtful, and I remind them of that. And I went in there and we preached to 6 older ladies and a dog. And for 10 minutes, I gave them my fury and said, you need to get out there and share your faith. And I berated them. And then Stan picked up the pieces and preached this lovely pastoral sermon about keep doing what you're doing. You're doing the best you can. God sees the hidden things. God cheers you on. Many of that generation have passed on now. People we knew and loved. Today would be my dad's 73rd birthday, and he's passed on to the promised land. It would be 73, wouldn't it, Mum? 74. Oh, right, 1 year. Potato. It's 74. Was he 22 when I was born? Well, you learn a new thing every day. Every day's a school day, isn't it? Those generations, they pass on. And in our Bible story today, the generations are passing on. And the story starts with counting people, and it ends with rethinking about which people count. The previous generation, Moses and Aaron's generation, has passed on. They went from slavery into the wilderness for 40 years. And after those 40 years, freedom from slavery is fully being realised. Why 40? That crops up throughout Scripture, because for Jews the number 40 is a number that you think for 39 periods, and then in the 40th you make a decision. Jesus 40 days in the wilderness, Elijah 40 days in the wilderness, the Jewish people 40 years in the wilderness, 39 years, and then the 40th one, we're going to make a decision. We are going into the promised land. And they have a census in Numbers chapter 26, and there are 601,730 Israelites, 12 tribes with 2 to 3 descendants who are leaders of each clan. But there's one exception, and that clan is Manasseh. Their genealogy goes back 7 generations deep to get to the point in Numbers 26 verse 33 where it says this: Zelophehad, son of Hepher, had no sons. He had only daughters, whose names were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. I never knew till I read this passage that Noah was also a woman's name. Did you? That's a Christmas quiz question this year, isn't it? Noah was a woman's name as well as a man's. This isn't just an extra detail. We find out the reason for it in the next chapter. Chapter 27, verse 1. The daughters of Zephilahad, son of Hephner, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh. You be up here and read these names. Belonged to the clans of Manasseh, son of Joseph. The names of the daughters were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. They came forward and stood before Moses, Eleazar the priest, and the leaders, and the whole assembly at the entrance to the tent of meeting, and said, Our father died in the wilderness. He was not among Korah's followers who banded together against the Lord, but he died for his own sin and left no sons. Why should our father's name disappear from his clan because he had no son? Give us property among our father's relatives." So Moses brought the case before the Lord, and the Lord said to him, "What Zephelahad's daughters are saying is right. You must certainly give them property as an inheritance among their father's relatives and give their father's inheritance to them. Say to the Israelites, if a man dies and leaves no son, give his inheritance to his daughter. If he has no daughter, give his inheritance to his brothers. If he has no brothers, give his inheritance to his father's brothers. If his father had no brothers, give his inheritance to the nearest relative in his clan, that he may possess it. This is to have the force of the law for the Israelites, as the Lord commanded Moses." Naming is powerful in the Bible, but many significant women aren't named. The Samaritan woman at the well in John chapter 4, we don't know her name, and yet she is central to reshaping Jesus' thinking about non-Jewish people. Or women are given in relation to the male character they're closest to. Jephthah's daughter in Judges 11 is one example. But these daughters are named. Probably names that most of us have never heard of in Scripture before. And their names suggest vigour and joy. Milcah means queen. Mahlah means dancer. Hoglah means partridge. They kind of dance around, don't they? And Tirzah means she is pleasant. Wouldn't you be gutted if you were called Tirzah? I'm queen, I'm dancer, I'm partridge. I'm just pleasant. Parents kind of run out of names when they got to me. So, well, she's all right, isn't she? I mean, she's not exactly a queen, but she'd do. She is pleasant. I remember when I was a governor at Riverhead Infant School in Sevenoaks, the Teletubby school. I actually was praying a few weeks ago and the head teacher who'd retired from there popped into my head. So I just texted her and said, "I hope you're doing well. I've been praying for you." And she said, "Oh yeah, I'd love to catch up for coffee." And so she came and met me here for coffee on Wednesday, and I took her on a guided tour of the church. And she said, "This place is unbelievable." Don't think she follows Jesus yet. Not clear, but she was bowled over. She said, "I will be back. I want to be involved in this place." And I used to sit with her in governors' meetings, and the chair of governors loved maths. He loved numbers. I think he was, who are the people that work out numbers so that you don't go under financially? Rob, what are you? Accountant. Sorry to wake you up, Rob. Apologise. Accountant. I think he was an accountant. And so they would spend ages on the numbers. The only reason I was a governor is because I wanted to protect the teachers so that they weren't overworked. That was my main drive for being in there. And we got to the stage where the chair of governors said, "Right, we're going to do the numbers now. Neil, when you get bored, put your hand up and we'll move on." And so I'd let them ramble on for 7 or 8 minutes, then I'd just go like that. I'd go, "Okay, thank you, Neil. We're going to move on now to the next bit." I imagine that a lot of the people, when they did this census, were bored of the numbers. They were thinking, can we just get into the promised land? Do we have to count all 601,000 of us? Can't we just get going? Probably Moses and the high priest Eleazar were exhausted. This was a laborious task. Can you stop moving? Right, we're going to have to start again. 1, 2, 3, 4. And so it went on and on and on. The hot desert day would have been there. And then the 5 sisters come forward when it's all done and everyone wants to go home. And Moses wants to hang up his stirrups and have a rest. They came forward. In the Hebrew, that could mean drew near, leaned in, made an approach. And they stood before Moses and the high priest. They created a very public scene. Do you remember in Exodus 18 when Moses' father-in-law Jethro had come to see how they were doing in the wilderness, and he drew Moses aside and said, basically, "You're going to kill yourself if you keep working like this. You can't have every complaint come to you, Moses. Divide the people into hundreds and 50s and 10, get wise people, and these people, when they've got a complaint, go to the wise people and say it to them. Only the really difficult ones, Moses, should come to you. These 5 women should not have come to Moses. They are not doing the right thing in their culture's eyes. You didn't just knock on Moses' tent flap. It was not the done thing. Imagine the crowd, tired, sand in their feet, itchy, hungry, standing for hours, thinking, I was counted 4 hours, 53 minutes ago, and I'm still here. Give us a break. Why didn't we pack a lunch? Because I didn't know it would take this long. Well, work it out. There's 601,000 of us. I know, I've been here as well. And then the 5 women, daughters, walk up to Moses. I imagine frustration, muttered comments. Why are they doing this? This isn't how we do things. We've never done it like this in our past. The way we used to do it worked just fine. These women are mentioned 3 times in the Bible, always together as one voice. They are united in a sisterhood seeking justice, and they have each other's back. There's nothing like it in the Christian faith, is there, when you know that people have got your back. And you step out for God and you think, I'm not on my own. We have an ongoing conversation about our garden at home. I want it all to be a veggie patch. Look at the size of that cabbage I grew last summer as evidence. It's the size of my head. I grew 39 cabbages last year. My oldest Megan was thrilled. We had the last one last week. Joe would like more flowers in the borders and in the garden. Noah and Amos and Megan would like a football pitch. Evie would like a sunbathing and crocheting area. And so the discussion goes on, because land is important and land is ours. These 5 sisters, whose father had died without any sons, have no male heir, and so they have no right to any land. And land was more important for them, I would suggest, than us. When you've been in slavery and you've not owned anything, and then you've been in the wilderness for 40 years and not had a place to call home, having a plot of land that is called home is wonderful. When I get home and I've not got a meeting in the evening, the first thing I do, whatever the time is put on my pyjamas. And the kids say to me, why'd you do that? I say, because I'm home. It's awkward sometimes when people from church come to the door and kind of don't look at you but do, because you're in your pyjamas at 6:30 p.m. We must make sure that every people group in Israel has a plot of land, so that none of us are ever in the wilderness again, and none of us ever feel like slaves. And so we make sure that every son gets the land that his father had. This was practical, even noble. It wasn't sexist. It was an agricultural economy that ensured that everyone had enough land. But the 5 sisters are missing out. And they ask Moses, can we keep our family's land? Can you not take it from us just because we're women? Can you change the law for us? We are overlooked, marginalised, forgotten, not understood. Will you change the rules? And between verses 4 and 5, Moses says nothing. He doesn't, on live cameras, berate someone who is beneath him and humiliate them. He hears what they say, and he goes to the tent of meeting to talk with God. The God, we're told, whom he spoke with as a friend in Exodus 33. And God tells Moses that he should give the sisters the land, because they are absolutely right and they should get it. God is so definite in his response. There's no wiggle room, showing that they were absolutely correct to raise this issue. Father and son Christopher and Richard Hayes say, God can handle being challenged. A God who cannot be challenged is too small to be the God described in the Bible. God then makes a decision in verses 8 to 11. and the biblical laws that God had laid down are changed. God says, I've changed my mind on this. In fact, if we look in the Old Testament, there are 3 sets of laws. There's the book of the covenant in Exodus chapter 20 to 23. There's the priestly code, Leviticus chapters 1 to 26. And there's the Deuteronomic code, Deuteronomy chapter 4 to chapter 28. 3 different sets of laws that God gives to the people at different times as God's mind interacts with human beings and thinks, I'm going to change what we're going to do together. These 3 sets of laws, they cover different topics, but they also differ when they discuss the same topics. Here's one example. In Exodus 20, it says that they are allowed to sacrifice on any altar where God's name is remembered. But in Deuteronomy chapter 12, it warns against sacrificing just anywhere and says that you must only sacrifice in one location. God is interacting with his people as time moves on, and he's altering the way he works with them so that he can be gracious and merciful and loving to them and uphold justice for everyone. God seems less troubled about changing his plans and reacting to fluctuating situations than sometimes us Christians do. God is not a clockmaker who set creation going and then sat back and said, well, I'm done. God interacts with us all the time. Those writers said God is more humanitarian than some people give him credit for being. These are 5 amazing sisters. These 5 women, one writer says, teach us to dig deeply and argue persuasively from within a shared biblical tradition if we would overturn old customs and create new possibilities in social and economic relationships between men and women. These women are models of boldness, fueled by hope, models of advocacy, fueled by a concern for the larger community, and models of faithfulness, fueled by a dynamic relationship with their tradition and their God. And then in Joshua chapter 17, verse 4, these 5 sisters get the land, only after reminding the male leaders that they'd agreed to it. Guys, remember when we were in the wilderness and you said that God had said we could have that? Can we please have it now? And it's given to them. In half term, we went up to see our oldest son, Noah, in Manchester. And he decided that we go to lots of nice, fairly expensive restaurants to eat while we were up there. What a coincidence. And when we were coming back from Manchester city centre, we got on the bus. And we got on the bus, and I said to the boys, Noah, who's 19, and Amos, who's 12, lads, when we get on, try and get up the front on the top deck and sit right at the front, because that's where they both sat as little kids with my dad coming back from Tonbridge High Street. Get on the bus, sit next to Roger, and see the view. And so I took a photo of them on the bus at the front and sent it to Mum, saying, look, they're still honouring Dad's memory. They might not have had that luxury if they were black and lived in America in the 1950s, where buses, like everything else, were segregated. And white people sat at the front of the bus, and black people sat at the back of the bus, and the middle section of the bus was for both. But if you were white, you could ask a black person to stand, and they would have to, according to the law, and they would sit in your place. And then if that section filled up, the white people could then ask the black people in the black section to get up so that they could sit in those places as well. You would pay your money at the front. If you were a black person, the bus driver would often say, you can't walk through the white section, get off, walk up to the back of the bus and get on there and sit in your section. And often, as you got from paying for the bus to walk to the back, the bus driver would drive off. You having paid for your ticket and now not able to get on to the bus. It was accepted as the way things are. It was preached in churches, upheld by white male ministers. On Monday, the 5th of December 1955, the Montgomery bus boycott started and lasted for well over a year and a half, where black people refused to get on the buses. They would walk to work. They would car share. They would do anything. One elderly black lady was interviewed, walking to work every day, walking home every day. And they said to her, "How do you feel?" She said, "My feet are tired." "Why do you do it?" She said, "Because my soul has been tired for decades. And my soul's not tired now. My feet are tired, but my soul is free." But the bus boycott didn't start on Monday, the 5th of December, 1955. Actually started on Thursday, the 1st of December, 1955, when a small, older black lady called Rosa Parks was sat in the black section of the bus after a hard day's work. And a white man came on and in strong, offensive words told her to move. And she said, "No, I'm tired. I'm not moving." Police were called. She was arrested. She was put in jail. Her husband told her she was stupid. Why did you do this? Because of the ramifications for her. She spent the next 10 years in near poverty because people held her at arm's length and persecuted her. But she was glad she sat down. It wasn't Martin Luther King Jr. who started that civil rights movement. It wasn't Ralph Abernathy. It wasn't JFK. It wasn't Bobby Kennedy. It wasn't Levinstein, the powerful Jewish businessman. It wasn't Bayard Rustin, the political leader and analyst. It was Rosa Parks, a powerless lady who sat down, who knocked at the tent flap of Moses' abode and said, "Can you listen to me?" So what, Neil? 4 things I want to leave you with, and they're really quick. Firstly, we all have a voice. Many of you ladies in here and online have been silenced in church over time. And I apologise because it's wrong. You've been told you can't preach, you can't lead, you can't speak, you must wear a hat. You've been limited. And this is a church where you have absolutely equal rights. So if you've been held back and you feel that you want to be free, please come and talk to me, because I would love you to be involved in this place. Secondly, all voices should be heard. I've received about 150 messages and emails since my sermon on the 9th of February, and I've listened to each one of them, and I will reply to every single one of them. Some of them are painful to read, some of them are uplifting. I will listen to them all. No voice is too small to effect godly change. Your voice, whether you're a woman or a man, at work, at home, at church, is a voice that can bring about change. And finally, God listens to our voice and is open to change, to show more mercy. Otherwise, what's the point of prayer? Prayer isn't just about asking God to change things, but it's a big chunk of it. God doesn't always change them. It's not a simple formula. We do this and God does that. There's a mystery to it. I get all that. But God does listen to us, and God does interact with us. And God does sometimes change situations and even change the way God operates so that God's love and mercy can flow. 5 brilliant women. God bless them.